All right, it's an exciting time in boxing with a major, highly anticipated fight coming up in July. And a new boxing documentary is out for Showtime. Joining me to talk about these exciting times is the president of Showtime Sports. That is Stephen Espinoza. He joins me now. Stephen, always good to talk some boxing with you. How's it going, man?
Excellent. Glad to be back on. Appreciate the time.
Anytime now. Stephen, Showtime, they have this new Andre Ward documentary. It's out right now for people to see. Ward, who has been retired from boxing, is now 39 years old. He's an elder statesman of the sport. Are people aware of the greatness of Ward, and do you think this doc showcases that?
I think the hardcore boxing fans are, but I'm not sure he's as big of a name as maybe he should be. He's an Olympic gold medalist, a unified champion, always known for being very classy, very well composed, very articulate, just a really solid guy all around. But also, somewhat reserved and somewhat private. And, especially in nowadays, I find those kind of athletes, intriguing because, of course, society and culture pushes everyone, including athletes, to the opposite. Want to disclose all your entire life on social media and give it to. That's not what Andre Ward was. He was very smart, very calculated, very reserved. He gave what he wanted to give, and he controlled his narrative. And that meant for us as sort of filmmakers and a network that there's a lot of undiscovered info, a lot of unspoken facts about him, and we found it fascinating.
Yeah, and I think people will find it too when they see it because, as you said, he was such a reserved guy as a fighter and pretty much still is today, even though he's retired from the game. So that brings me to my second question, Stephen. What do you hope that people take away from this Andre Ward documentary, and what do you think his legacy is as a boxer?
I think the perception of Andre Ward is that he's had a pretty not easy road, but he's had a sort of a gilded career. He had the Olympic gold medalist. He was a successful career. Stayed out of trouble. Always said the right things. And I think one of the lessons of this is, you can't always judge a book by its cover. And in this way, in sort of a positive sense, in the sense of everything looked positive, everything looked easy, and it was far from that. You dig a little between the surface, you find out he grew up in a household when both parents had substance abuse issues. He had his own detour into drug dealing. He almost left the sport. It's really like we see in boxing quite often, a story of overcoming the odds and really overcoming a traumatic upbringing. But there's also sort of a lesson here in controlling the narrative. And I mean, not just athletes, but people in general. He controlled what people said about him. He knew that boxing is a sport that tends to suck the marrow out of people and use them. And he said, I'm going to do this on my own terms. And I'm going to decide how and when I give things to the sport and to the public.
Yeah, and he's given the public this great documentary, obviously the access that he's given and people to get a little bit of insight into his career and his life. Let's talk some other boxing, Stephen, because big fight coming up for Showtime, July 29th. I know you're excited about this. I've been waiting a long time for this fight. I'm glad it's here. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. In your eyes, what makes this matchup such an intriguing one?
Well, quite simply, it's probably the two of the best boxers in the sport. And I think you've got a really good style matchup, but you've got high stakes. And in this particular fight, it's very simple. The winner is going to be the undisputed welterweight champion and pretty unanimously the best fighter in the sport. So it's very clear what they're fighting for. It's not real complicated. There's not, explanation. Whoever wins this is the best fighter in the sport. This is a rivalry that's been percolating for years, two action fighters, and it really is shaping up as maybe the fight of this generation, along the lines of Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, you had Mayweather, Pacquiao. This, I believe, will go down in that same category, one of those high-profile glamour fights that sort of defined this generation of boxing.
Yeah, and I think one thing is people have been waiting for a long time for this. They're hoping that it lives up to the billing. I know you guys are hoping for that too. And when we look at boxing, Stephen, last thing for me here is we've seen some exciting fights in boxing in the past year or so. What do you think about the state of the sport, where it is right now in 2023? And do you see interest growing in the sport of boxing?
I'm really excited about where the sport is, and I think that's a function of a lot of thoughtfulness and a recommitment from a lot of people in the sport. Um, like all of us, the sport was affected very heavily by the pandemic, and I think that marked a change because as soon as people came out of the pandemic, a lot of people decided, look, we're going to go about life or job or relationships, somewhat different. And it almost feels as if the sport of boxing has done that because coming out of that pandemic and realizing, hey, this thing can disappear in a moment's notice. What we've seen is the best fights being consistently made time and time again. And we've got unified champions. We have more undisputed champions in the sport right now than we've ever seen at any point in history. And that means the best guys are fighting the best guys. So I think I'm very excited. Now, we've also got the other wave of the influencer boxing, and I know that's sort of the Jake Pauls and the Logan Pauls. People are all over the map in terms of their feelings, but one thing that's very clear, it's bringing a young demographic to the sport. And I think for those two reasons, I'm very excited about the future of boxing.
Yeah, definitely got to be very excited, especially with this Crawford-Spence fight coming up. That will be on Showtime on July 29th. Steven's excited about it. I'm excited about it too. And people should also check out the Andre Ward doc that is out now on Showtime. Stephen, as I said, always good to talk boxing with you. Hopefully we'll see you again soon down the road. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank
Stephen.
you.